Hello and welcome to the next installment of the New Workspace, Top Security Predictions for 2021. In the new world of work, with more and more people working from anywhere, the traditional security perimeter has all but disappeared, and we're already seeing that security attacks are on the rise. Security teams will need a new mindset to keep their applications and their data safe, as well as being able to protect their people, especially now that they are so much more distributed. In this episode, we'll be talking about the top security trends we expect to take center stage in 2021, as well as discussing some of the lessons learned from last year. I am Safi Obadilla, Field CTO at Citrix, and today I'm joined by Ayman, Dick, and Furman. I want to thank you all for your time, and I'll get each one of you to introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Ayman.
Hi everyone, thank you Safi. My name is Ayman Al-Hajjar. I'm the course leader for the cybersecurity and forensics at the University of Westminster. My background is mainly in cryptography and smart cities and Internet of Things, key distribution and cryptography in general. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Ayman. Dick?
Yes, good afternoon. My name's Dick, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the New Mexico Supreme Court. I'm the IT Director for all the judicial activities here in the state. I was previously the Chief Information Security Officer here in the same organization, and my background is military intelligence and cyber activities from a military perspective. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Dick. And Furman?
Hello, everyone. This is Fermin Serna. I'm Citrix Chief Information Security Officer. I've been on this role for almost a year and a half. Before this, I served as head of product security at Google for the last 8 years. Very glad to be here.
All right. Thanks, Furman. So let's get started, guys. So, I think when we start thinking about trends for 2021, it's hard to do that without really looking back over the course of 2020. And I really wanted to start there and get your perspective on how did 2020 and obviously the pandemic that took place impact the world of security? And Ayman, I think I'll start with you there.
Yes, thank you, Safi. Actually, there's no doubt that the coronavirus pandemic has definitely disrupted the whole businesses and the whole digital environment. Add to that usually hackers are opportunists, and the pandemic was an opportunity for everyone, especially that it happened, of course, at a time that no one was actually ready for it. So we've seen, for example, in the first few months, a huge increase in the number of phishing attacks and phishing spam attacks. And phishing actually, naturally, it usually happens more in the work environment. So in the home environment. So what if we are working from home? So basically, all of our digital assets actually are now in this environment that has this more bigger threat. Also, for example, in the UK, if you look in the last year, it's been reported that there is at least £20 million of losses in attacks. That is actually increase of £20 million rather than this is this is the value of the attacks that happened in the last year. So as I said, the hackers are usually opportunists. We've seen attacks on video conferencing systems. We've seen attacks on wireless. So for example, wireless drive-by attack, where people are driving around, sniffing the wireless traffic. Nowadays, people are working from home. So it's a lot more lucrative, basically.
Yeah.
There's a lot more data around. And so the home environment threat actually is the biggest impact that we had on the coronavirus, because it's an inherent insecure network in comparison with the network that we're used to in our work environment, basically.
No, that's right. I definitely think the shift of people moving out of, as you said, secure, protected corporate networks to their home network, which in most cases has minimal to no security, definitely presents a broader opportunity for threat actors to take advantage of. Dick, what's your perspective?
Well, we've suffered from similar issues, and being a government security and technology manager, we're probably even more invested or focused on having that on-prem type environment. And we also generally don't have like bring your own devices or anything that kind of mixes into our network. Well, just as much as we turned our network inside out and our users are now at home and kind of outside of our on-prem wall, we've also got that bring your own device aspect of everything, every connection that a user is making out a lot of times having on their personal devices. And so for me, the data control and understanding, where our sensitive information resides now, keeping that inside some kind of controlled enclave, even if it is in that device, that's important to me. And keeping control of where the data is when it's at risk. That's been the challenge that I think we've had to face. And from a court perspective, it's very document driven. Everything we do is about documents, case files, and the actions that happen around that. So those are just handled very casually by people. They don't see that as sensitive. It's a Word document. But the content, of course, is very sensitive. So we have a real challenge to help people understand that your own device is at risk, and these documents should be protected just the same in either environment. That's been a big one for us.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. I mean, and I think particularly in your case, the security and confidentiality of documents and documents can sometimes be very easy to move around. It's not something that's easy to control. So I can definitely see the challenge there of having access to that at home environments. And I think the other aspect of that is you don't always know who's around you at home. Your flatmates, roommates, you could be operating from a cafe or something like that. And so that physical security and privacy aspect, I definitely think comes into play there as well. Min, your thoughts?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, this is a great question because I always thought that it is good to take a look to the past for different reasons. The first one is not to make the same mistakes again. And the second one is to try to adapt yourself so for the things that could come in the future, right? So answering your question about 2020, maybe we should step back and not talk too much about security and talk about technology, how it was changing already pre-coronavirus, right? And in my opinion, I think we even before the coronavirus, there were two things that they were happening. First one is people were working remotely, and maybe not full time, but people were 8 hours in the office and then they went to a coffee shop or then they went to home and they opened a laptop, right? So to some degree, people were working remotely. Now they are forced to work remotely, right? So that's number one. Number two is we see more and more services, products moving to the cloud, right? So the concept of you buy something and you implement it in your office, it's less and less predominant, right? And this comes with several consequences because the legacy security that everyone was thinking about, I put a firewall in my office, I put a proxy, I put all these security controls. If you think about the data flows, you're in a Starbucks, you open your laptop, you check email, those requests, those data, which one of those they go through your corporate networks, through all those security controls, right? So I think the 2020, what happened is that accelerated the need of adapting to those data flows, right? The legacy security controls that existed, you need to adapt them to the new ways of technology, and security needs not only to protect, but also enable the business.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I definitely think everyone around the world has seen a dramatic acceleration in the adoption of technology. And, in some ways, exactly to your point, your applications and data services that you need are leaving your private data centers and moving to public spaces, and your people are leaving corporate networks, going to public networks as well. So you definitely have a very different paradigm when it comes to thinking about how do I protect my people and my assets and my organization. And so I think that sort of leads into the next question is that, I guess with all of that happening, that change of mindset happening, do you think organizations need to consider security as a much more higher priority now? I mean, not to say it wasn't a priority before, but with that change and remote workers as well, has it become a higher priority? For me, maybe we'll just continue with you.
No, I think to some degree, I mean, companies and other entities, we don't have any other option. This is similar to whenever you are, in real life, you go to buy some bread or something, you don't have, all your money, sewing it around, right? Here in the cyber world, you need to do the same as you operate, as you are trying to achieve your goals a company, a university, as whatever entity, you need to protect, same as you do with other aspects of your life, right? So it needs to be embedded, right? It should not be an afterthought of, hey, I'm doing business on the internet, I need to do security on top of privacy, on top of HR. You do it because you don't have any other option. And I think companies, either they were doing it or they are starting to realize that security has to be there.
Yeah. And I like that notion that security isn't an afterthought where you've designed the whole application or solution and then you go to security. I think security should be built into it from the outset and considered from the beginning when you're designing the solution, just because I feel it also leads to a much more seamless experience for the end user. It's not an afterthought where I've had to put a box around it and it sort of impedes on that end user experience. And so that gets me thinking about another aspect, taking the learnings of 2020 and everything that transpired. Are organizations' approach to security changing going forward? Are they taking a higher level focus on how they make sure that security is considered within the organization, that it's not an afterthought? And so, maybe we'll start with you there.
Yeah, no, Safi, this is a great question. In short, I believe that the organizations, companies, governments, different entities, they will not have any other option. They need to start thinking about security not as an afterthought, but embed security into the DNA of the organization in the different stages of the projects, processes. So they don't miss that security aspect that could later harm them, right? They don't have any option. Either through this 2020 they got protected, they embedded all these things into their DNA, or now they have to do it in a rush because 2021 is not going to slow down. The attackers are not going to say coronavirus is almost gone, we're going to move to something else, right? They are going to continue and probably scale.
Yeah, no, that's right. Dick, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's a lot of us, we've been waiting for this opportunity. And I think that the senior leaders understand that security has to be at the top of their mind now. If there was ever an opportunity to neglect it in the past, 2020 brought it into view for all senior leaders to understand that you can't neglect it. The risks are real, and if it's an afterthought, you're not doing what you need to do to keep this space secure. So for us, the senior leaders, the CISOs and CTOs that are out there on the security side of the equation, we need to be able to dust off that list of tasks and that work that we've been waiting to get done. And now that those resources and that interest from the right people are there, we need to get that list out and say, here's the things that we've always said are important, and we need to get to work on these now. And I'm glad that you're here and you're paying attention, but we've got work to do. And take that to your leadership and get it done.
Yeah. And I like something that you mentioned when we were preparing for this, where you were saying, if we take this approach of thinking about security from the forefront, we can create a much more seamless experience for the end user as well. So people don't necessarily see security as this roadblock or this hurdle that they have to go through just to get their work done. It's just there in the background. It's more or less invisible and seamless. And that really leads people to not have to worry about it. It doesn't have to be something that they actively think about. It's just happening in the background and they're none the wiser.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know that from the user experience perspective, that the best security is invisible security. When you interact with a service online and you don't know kind of which part is securing you, or it's not obvious to you, but the leadership or the people that built that system, they understand that security is baked in. The user there's no opportunity to resist. There's no opportunity to ignore that safety or that control that's been put in place. And the better that we can construct systems to support that, the more compliance that you get from your users. So your program's more effective.
Absolutely. Ayman, what's your thoughts?
If you think about what happened in the last year, I always say it's something like bring your own device. This is a nightmare for someone who's trying to secure the network. But now, instead of bringing your own device to the work environment, we actually bring the whole work environment to our home. So yes, security by design is actually something that this year showed that very few organizations actually have that in mind when it's implementing their security. Sometimes it's all about ticking ticking, like ticking some boxes, saying, yeah, I've done that. But then when it comes to real implementation, it's becoming real burden on users, and it's becoming a real burden on user, and it's very complex in a way that it's not going to work like this. I agree with everything that was said in terms of it needs to be invisible. It needs to be more user-friendly. It needs to be more accessible for everyone, because we can't expect everyone to be security analyst. We can't expect everyone to be expert. We need to have some accessibility in a way to allow everyone to use it in a secure way, and so on.
Yeah, and I think I like that point that you made, that we can't expect everyone to be security experts. People aren't going to know all the things that they need to do and be prepared for. I mean, there is a certain amount of awareness that we need everyone to have, but for the most part, if we can get to a point where your organization's security posture is more or less invisible, and it's just happening in the background, I think that's the best form there. I think earlier on, we also talked about the increase in attacks that we've seen, just given the shift of everyone working from home, and also the shift of applications and data to cloud. In your opinions, I mean, do you think cyber actors have become more sophisticated, or is there just more opportunity because, people and applications and data are much more distributed now? Ayman, I'll start with you on that one.
There's no doubt that the malicious cyber hackers or whatever are becoming more sophisticated, for sure, or the tools they're using are more sophisticated. However, also the opportunities are a lot bigger than it used to be. So, for example, think Internet of Things. So the devices, there's this big environment that is really a very insecure environment, is actually giving a lot of open doors for hackers to access all our networks and all our environment. Add to that the tools that the hackers are using. If you look at the last 10 years, for example, ransomwares, you'll find that if you look at the code of those ransomwares, they didn't really change much. They really didn't change much. What is changing is just like tweaking them in a way that they evade the last possible security control that we put in place to protect such ransomware. And then and it's like, it's like a rat race. You keep on running one after the other, and it's not really working. We need to get back to the beginning where we think, hang on a second, ransomware has been since 1990s, and we're still talking about it after 30 years. Or viruses from 1980, and we're still talking about, and so on. So I think the technology is evolving, that's for sure. I think also our environment becoming really complex. This interoperability, it's not a word where everyone mentioned, and it's like, no, it's very serious, because having this interoperability in our environment allow us to have several different devices, several different manufacturers, different software, different environments. They need to have certain common standards, some things that, that put them together, we can secure them together without having different standards for this and this, different security measures, different complexity, you need an expert for every single measure that you have in your environment. That make it very difficult for even for companies. They see security as a burden. So you mentioned this before, and I think this is one of the reasons.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point. I definitely think that whole idea of complexity, particularly in the last 10 years in the workplace, in the devices that we use, even from a personal perspective, is adding to the complexity and the opportunity to some degree of threat actors to give them ideal targets, because there's just so many different devices that we're all trying to make use of. Dick, what's your thought? Sorry, Ayman.
So I just remembered, for example, in terms of complexity, I used to have a client who, his work environment, we were doing penetration testing for them. His work environment forced their users to change their password every month. I found this really wrong. It's really, I think at some point, because if users, for example, are forced to change their password every month, at some point, there will be some weakness in the system. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Putting it on a post-it note, for example. Yeah. I can't imagine changing my password every month, and I work in cybersecurity. So how about someone who actually it was a marketing company, so they have nothing to do with cybersecurity? It is a very big burden, and this is where mistakes will happen, and this is where opportunities for hackers will happen as well.
No, that's true. Dick, what's your thoughts? Cyber actors more sophisticated or just more opportunity these days?
You know, I will probably take the angle of more opportunity, especially over the last 12 to 18 months. I think if we just looked at the raw numbers of amount of attacks and types of attacks, as Ayman said, you know, there is no such thing as ransomware 2.0. We're still dealing with ransomware 1.0, and it's just been pretty much the same thing for a long time. There hasn't been some big breakthrough on the threat side that has completely changed the landscape in the last 5 years even. It's really been opportunities, and just like Ayman said, the very small nuances of evading detection or evading the whatever safeguard we put in place. And I think the last year just increased the possibility for those opportunities exponentially. And so that's really, I think if we talk about the uptick that has happened recently and what we're still dealing with, I think we're just suffering from that increase of opportunities right now. I think when we talk about the return to work and the future of what's going to happen, will that decrease? I do think we'll see some corresponding decrease of your low level kind of run of the mill attacks. I think those huge spikes in phishing events will decrease some. And I think some of the other really casual types of attacks that are just the easy to execute attacks, those will decrease as the opportunities kind of disappear over the next year.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Fermin, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, before I answer that question, which is a great question, I'm going to give you some title of a newspaper news article that was a couple of months ago. Ryuk, which is a malware, a very known malware. The malicious actors behind Ryuk made $150 million last year. $150 million. So this, I mean, I immediately had two thoughts. What is the calling effect to criminals in other fields where they are thinking it's like, okay, maybe I'm in the real life doing X, Y, and Z, and here, anonymously, from the internet, I can make a lot of money. So the calling effect is going to be massive, right? We're going to see a lot more actors, right? It's not that they are either more sophisticated or less or opportunistic, it's that they are going to be more, that the spectrum is going to be wider, right? And the other thing is, like, think about this, 150 millions, what is going to be the scale that they can put in place with this 150 million? It's more like a return of investment, right? So if you take a look to the operators of this malware, this ransomware, they have call centers, they have infrastructure all around the world, right? If something gets shut down in a country, they have something else that they can provide the decryption keys. They can actually, I mean, I was reading an article. They provide support to decrypting your files, right? So there is a big business around this, and it is definitely, they became more sophisticated. There are more actors. There is more money. I can only say brace for impact. And I also wanted to call out the disbalance, right? Because defense versus attackers, I mean, we need to protect everything. They just need to find one way. Yeah. And usually the one way is the human error factor, which is the easiest for them. That's why we're seeing a lot of phishing. That's where we're seeing a lot of trying to social engineer people through LinkedIn, through social networks, download this and execute it, things like that. It's going to be a very, very challenging years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, Dick, sorry, it was over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of follow up to his comment there. One thing that, we talk about with ransomware, people are locking up your data, right? Or they're stealing your data, proving that they have it, and then forcing you to pay for it. Almost all of it is data focused right now. Think about when the threat actor decides to ransom a piece of critical infrastructure. Yeah. When someone gets a hold of an actual control switch somewhere and says, I'm going to turn off the water at this dam, and something catastrophic is going to happen unless you pay for this. When someone gets a hold of a surgery robot and they ransom that robot mid-surgery and say, your patient is on the table dying, send the money my way and we'll turn it back on. This event is not far away. Something like that's going to happen in the future. And ransomware, that will be the next trend, I think, or when that threat turns the page, is when it goes from the clock is ticking on your data to the clock is ticking on a physical danger that's about to happen. That is a totally different story. and I think we're going to see it soon.
No, I think that's one of the, I guess, the downsides of everyone and everything being so connected, right? Everyone has a way in. I do see other potential threats around just the increased use of APIs. I mean, APIs, as much as they help build out integrations between applications, they're open pipes back into your data stores, right? And depending on how security focused that API developer is, you're almost beholding your organization to their security posture. So there's just so many different potentials there. And so I guess that sort of leads me into the next question, which is really around what do you guys see as the top trends for security for 2021? I mean, we've talked a lot about ransomware and threat actors, about people working from home, about the need for invisible security. Dick, maybe we'll start with you. I mean, what do you see as things being that are front of mind in terms of security?
Well, if we're talking about the threat trends and what we just talked about, the maturity of the threat actors, right? We used to be really specifically concerned about advanced persistent threats and the state level funded folks. But Fairman just brought up a great point that these other organizations are now approaching or reaching that level of maturity. They've been making that money. If they made 150 million last year, well, they probably made 50 million the year before. So those deep pockets are becoming available to things outside of the state agencies. So we've got to, that APT list is going to grow, and it will become even more of a mature business. So I think that's something where it's such a strange thing to say there's an emerging industry there, but unfortunately it's already been emerging and it's now reaching maturity. So I think we're going to just have a whole nother level of threat actors out there that, again, a state actor is looking for a specific outcome. That's usually some sort of disruption. It's not always to extract money from you. These other criminal actors that are going to have similar capabilities have really different motivations. And we really don't always know what those motivations are yet. Someone's going to pop up with a threat that we just don't understand, but to them it means everything, and we just haven't quite wrapped our brain around it. But they're sitting around building their resources right now, waiting to make that threat pop. And I'm not sure what that'll be, but as these people continue to stack this money and gain these skills and resources, someone's going to surprise us. And I think that it could be coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Fermin?
No, and I mean, on top of what Dick already mentioned, I totally agree with him. I mean, we talk about ransomware, we talk of phishing, nation states. I mean, over the last 10 years, the way that they were making intrusions into companies were through what we call 0 days exploits, which they are very costly to find. But now even the other thing that these malicious people they have is patience, right? They can wait. Yeah. They can wait until you're vulnerable to something, right? And then it becomes, and with all this money that they have, they can prepare for that moment, right? For example, let's bring something that is real of the last couple months. I mean, these exchange vulnerabilities that they are going around, they're in the news and all these things. These people, they can wait for this ones or a future one that there is a known exploit, and scan the internet and compromise as many people as possible with their infrastructure to do it, call centers and all this, right? So not only the skills for some targets, they need to be quite high, but for the vast majority, I mean, we lower the skill bar, but also they are, there's a concept of time. It's like, it's not that you're protected at one moment of time. You need to sustain that protection over time, right? Because these people are very, very patient.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ayman?
Yes, I mean, I definitely agree that ransomware is something that we'll keep on seeing. I think unfortunately, also the political environment that we live in is also going to be a factor. I think we're going to see possibly something similar to SolarWinds, I think, because the increase of cyber warfare is a fact. It's been happening in the last few years, and it will keep on happening. And this environment that we're living in, I think, is causing it anyway. Also, there's, of course, cloud vulnerabilities. We're relying more on cloud. We're even relying on cloud now for identity management and for access management. So this is also another new threat. Mobile threat, of course, is something that exists. We all have mobile. We're working we're doing things on the move. So there's applications, there's APIs, there's third-party things. I think 5G as well is going to be disruptive in some way. And 5G is going to be disruptive, especially with the Internet of Things. The more it becomes integrated and the more people are using it, I think the more we will see. So can you imagine the amount of data the increase of the amount of data that 5G will generate? And this by itself is a threat that is, I don't think we're ready to it yet, because that will, of course, by itself increase ransomware and include other attacks and so on. And also, there's something that if you go online now and search, for example, how to hack an account, right? You find so much information online. I'm not saying this is not a good thing. Probably it's a good thing, but saying that, there's so many people who, so even hacking became very accessible. It became, you can go online and find tools to do that. And there's a huge amount of information online that are actually related to different tools that you can use and so on.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, and I like what I guess all of you have sort of touched on, just so many different elements of potential threats and attacks that are likely to continue and amplify in coming years as well. And I think that sort of leads us to the next question, which is really around how do organizations prepare for this? I mean, I think there's no way you could prepare and predict every single type of threat, attack, phishing, ransomware, whatever it may be that your organization may face. And I've always sort of felt, that it's important to do what you can, but what's even more important is have a plan on how to react when you do get attacked. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Fermin, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Safi. This is a great question. I think this is $1 million question, right? It's like, how do you prepare for the unknowns, right? So I always answer this question in the same way, right? The thing that cannot get you something by surprise. You either need to know, and then you probably should have made a decision. Do I mitigate it or do I assume it, right? Mm-hmm. But you need to know what are your risks, right? So to answer your question is, if possible, because I know that there are entities, companies, governments, universities that may not have the budget to do this, if possible, to come up with a decent security plan and knowing your risks, knowing what are the threats that you are subject to, right? Knowing your environment, and then you define it's like based on the impact and based on the likelihood, do I assume it? Meaning that I don't have the resources to do it, or I'm going to postpone it later, but at least I know, or do I mitigate it, right? So what cannot happen is that you are caught by surprise by some type of attack and you don't know what to do. This is new to you, this is a new technology, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that I mean, this is common sense, right? This is how most security organizations and big companies work, is a risk-based analysis. The other thing is that maybe it links into one of the first answers that I do. You need to link it into kind of predicting where the technology is going and be there, right? For example, let me give you an example. 5 years ago, Kubernetes, it was not there, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, cloud was not there, right? So to be able to somehow predict, and that's through partnership with the different organizations in your entity, your company, to know where they are going and to be there with them, right? If they go one way and you are not there, I can guarantee you that some moment you're going to have an incident and it's going to be caught by surprise, and it's going to be a big fun for the attackers, but not for you.
No, that's right. Dick, what's your thoughts there?
Well, as he just said, we talked about earlier, if security is the last checkbox in your business plan or whatever it is that you do in your company, then it's probably one of the first things to get skipped over or forgot about. So, you've got the opportunity now you've got to remind people, hey, security can't be cut off the list, right? So as he said, you've got to remind people constantly. And from our position, I like the idea of being able to say, I'm aware of the risk and I already know what's going to happen if that day comes. It is a way to kind of work around that without spending the money to put controls in place against every single threat. I fall in line with that same, I like to call it going back to the basics, right? And that's what he just described, was prioritize your threats. If you know the industry that you're in and you understand that what's the most likely threat actor that's going to come after you, put your resources and your money towards that threat first and work your way down. And that's really the best way to be prepared. There are going to be those moments and there are going to be those opportunities, just like we talked, where it's just right outside of your visibility, or it's that user behavior that you've trained them all day and they just don't get it. Those things are going to happen. But if you're focused, if you're threat focused and you're prioritizing those threats, you're going to protect yourself against the really, really bad days most of the time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Ayman?
Thank you, Safi. I would like to add to what actually Dick said in terms of going back to the basis. I think if you look at how many companies don't actually, I don't want to generalize, but if you look at how many companies don't actually know what they have in their environment. So, for example, when they scan their network, oh, what's this device? Those devices are forgotten, probably. They haven't been used for a while and so on. But those devices are the biggest threat in your network, probably, because they haven't been updated, they're not used, and so on. So the best thing to do is to just unplug it. So I think it goes back to auditing again, and I agree with what was said. It's all about auditing. It's all about understanding your digital environment. But before that, I think you need to put a business continuity plan if anything goes wrong, and I think something will go wrong. Because statistically speaking, companies are vulnerable to attacks, and at some point they will have some sort of cyber incident. So they need to have some business continuity plan, because you can't imagine the number of companies who are, for example, they have ransomware and they don't have a backup. They don't even have, for example, a plan B to continue or to do whatever business they do. So risk management, yes, is important, is essential. Auditing all your devices, business continuity plan, until we have a secure by design environment that is used by all the hardware and software manufacturer. I think it all goes back again to user awareness and training. Although I don't think it's ideal, but I think at the moment this is what we have and this is what we need to deal with.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think it sort of lends me to the next question. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about the changing dynamics of organizational technology, and for me, you touched on it in the beginning with people working from home, acceleration of adoption of cloud technologies, and we also touched on the importance of security going forward and how that it needs to come to the forefront. So here, I wanted to get your perspective on what are the types of competencies that security professionals need to build out. If I'm either in the security industry or want to get into the security industry, what are the places I need to invest in terms of building skills? I saw some research from the US Bureau of Statistics saying that cybersecurity jobs are among the fastest growing career areas in the US. But it'd be good to get your perspective on advice for security professionals. Dick, let's start with you.
I actually mentor people that are trying to get into the cybersecurity industry all the time. I just spoke with a gentleman yesterday. He's a lawyer and he has a degree in accounting and he wants to get into cybersecurity. He said, this is just where I think my personal interest and passion lies. And that's amazing that someone who's been out there, had a career, and they realize the draw of this industry. And so I talk to these folks from, your college age person to that guy who's had a career and is ready to shift gears. And, I'm a big proponent of figure out the piece of cybersecurity that you think is most interesting to you and learn that skill set, because we really do have a lot of niche expertise. And in cybersecurity, we're already a subset of IT. And within security, there's continued subsets of expertise. So whenever I have that conversation with a person who wants to come into this industry, I ask them, why do you think this is interesting to you? Of course, it's pen testing, it's hacking that they've seen in movies, and they want to get on a keyboard and be in the Matrix, right? And I say, well, there's about 10 people in the world that do that. You're probably not going to be one of them. So what else do you want to do? And then I go from there. And I really always try to help them focus on what do you think you want to do within this industry? And that's a hard question to answer. Get that certificate and get to work. I always tell people, certificates will get you in the industry quickly and will give you that chance to look around and decide, have I picked the right lane or not? And it's actually a lower threat choice too, because you can get a certificate in a few months, one of these entry level items, and get out there and get to work. And maybe you put a year into it and then you can shift gears. And there's so many jobs to go around that the opportunities will be there.
Yeah. And I find that fascinating because I think, in the realm of security, especially, having people from different backgrounds, different industries that are coming into this space to bring their own experiences and mindsets, I think having that diversity of thought, particularly when you're trying to predict all these different types of potential threats, and that I think that helps actually strengthen the space. So that's great. Ayman, your thoughts?
I mean, I definitely agree that there's a big lack of cybersecurity experts in the workplace. And for example, in the University of Westminster, we focus more on so basically technology adapt, and we can't keep on looking at security the same way we looked at it 10 years ago. So if you look at, especially with IT and with security, things change quickly, and we keep on changing our courses quickly to make sure that, that, for example, AI, machine learning, blockchain technologies, all of these can be integrated, of course, in cybersecurity. All of these are actually the future of cybersecurity, I think, personally. Or, for example, zero architecture and zero trust architecture, and so on. We do have a lot of sophisticated and advanced tools. I think it's essential to have the training and education, to have the cybersecurity expert for the future. We can't have the cybersecurity expert for now. It needs to be about the future as well, because the future is changing, and we need to make sure that we are ready for those changes.
Yeah, makes sense. Fermin?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. So before I go into answering to your question, let me tell you, this field, if you don't want to get bored, if you want to have an excitement through your 8-10 hours that you spend every day, this is the field, right? If you like technology, if you like learning new things, this is a field, right? Now, is it an easy field? Maybe not, because changes constantly. I mean, what was valid last year, this year probably is valid 60%, and you need to relearn your job 40% of it. But I agree with Dick and Ayman. It's like the cybersecurity field is so broad right now. You have things from incident response, you have product security, you have cryptography. You have so many things, right? So my advice is focus on something and try to be the best one at that thing, right? Now, if your ambition is to be those type of unicorns, right? That my job is, if I find one, is to hire them. It's like I always give them this advice: is I try to be the best. Try to have deep knowledge on something, but also have a decent understanding of the rest. I mean, it doesn't need to be a deep understanding, but it could be a broad understanding of the security field. This way, you can pivot a little bit and help others, right? And whenever you are, for example, solving a field, you can pivot into the next one, right? So it's not easy. It's not easy to be a unicorn. It takes a lot of time, and a lot of people fail at this, right? But my advice is be agile, try to focus on something, be the best one on that thing, and then you're not going to be bored for the rest of your life.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I think you don't know what you don't know, and I think as long as you broaden your scope of experiences, then you can find out what you're truly passionate about and what you enjoy doing, and what presents the most opportunity as well. All right, so I think where I want to sort of close things off here is to get each of you to sort of provide some final words of advice. Whether, and I know we've touched on people looking to enter the security industry, but for people who are already in security, looking at what the future looks like in terms of being prepared for what's going to come in the security space. So really, I guess what I'm after is your final words of advice. Mm-hmm. Ayman, let's start with you.
Yes, thanks, Safi. Security is relative. Security is relative in the meaning of security is relative to what we have and where we are at the moment. If you think about a password, for example, password 20 years ago, for example, put my name 20 years ago, it would have taken 5-6 hours to break, to brute force that password. Now it takes a few seconds. So we really need to make sure that the security professionals in their landscape ensure that they are moving with that landscape, with that advancement of technology. As we said before, know your digital assets. It's really essential to know your digital assets. Auditing, risk management. I think zero trust is essential, especially nowadays, if you are working from home, and probably working from home is going to continue. Zero trust, because if you have this identity, this assessment for the identity to ensure that this is the right person, then at least you minimize the fact that someone malicious can be acting inside your network. I think you also could consider security as a service, and it's happening. It's something that's existing now, and especially if you're working from home. And I think this environment is going to stay for a while. So we need to get ready to think. So it's not a shock anymore. We're not surprised anymore. We need to act, I think. And for that reason, there's quite a few things that we need to do to ensure that opportunities don't exist. Because as we said before, as we all agreed, all of the attack didn't really change. So opportunities are what still remains. And this is what we can minimize in our network environment to avoid having those problems.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Fermin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to a couple of things that I said in the past. The first one is three things. First one is to be agile, right? 2020 is a great example of this. It's like all this coronavirus caught us by surprise and had deep impact and deep effects on how people were working, right? So be agile to adapt to those threats, those new things that you need to take care of, right? So as you are agile, you can adapt better, you can adapt quicker, and you can actually do what you're supposed to be doing, which is reduce the risk of your entity, right? The second thing is something that not that many people think about this, but be practical. Be practical and be pragmatic, right? Is that you don't need to solve something 100%, right? If you solve something 80%, it's better than zero, right? And then you iterate, right? So be practical. That's my second advice. And the final one, and I think is something that, personally speaking, I don't want to lose. Be curious. Keep learning, right? Because this field, the technology field, advances so quickly. As I mentioned, 10, 15 years ago, there was no cloud. 5 years ago, there was no Kubernetes. Now, who knows where we're going with machine learning, AI models, quantum cryptography. Keep learning, because if you don't keep learning, you're out of this job, or someone else is going to say, hey, I have those skills, right? And you need to, and let me tell you something, the attackers are learning as we speak, right? And they're going to adapt. So we need to adapt as the defenders to keep the pace of them, right? So those three things: be agile, be practical, be curious.
No, that's wise words, Fermin. Thank you. Dick?
My advice here is really focused on leaders, security leaders, whether you're a CISO or a manager, information security manager. You are probably already the smartest technology person in your organization or in your department. We do have to keep learning constantly, but there's something that we often neglect, and that's those soft skills. How to be a better business leader, how to be a better people manager, how to get buy-in from your peers that are across the table from you, and how to convince your CEO or your boardroom that your program needs help. So you can be the smartest technologist and you can understand the answer to all the problems, but if you can't get the rest of your organization to come on board and do what you need them to do, then it's just a plan and you can't put it into action. So I always advise people that if you're going to take your time to learn your industry, but take just as much time to learn the business around you. Learn about the people and learn how to interact with them so that you can achieve your goals. You've got to have them on board to achieve your goals. And that's usually how, something that if I give parting words, it's practice your soft skills and get better at that so you can actually get the things you need to get your work done.
And I really like that, Dick. I think, because you're right, you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't have the ability to influence and execute across the organization, there's really no point then. I definitely think those are wise words there. So I want to thank everyone for attending this episode of The New Workspace, and especially thanks to you guys, Ayman, Fermin, and Dick. I really enjoyed the discussion, and there was a lot of valuable insights that came out as well. Remember to register below for the next episode, The Remote Workforce 12 Months On, where we really ask the question, is the office dead? Thank you for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.